Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Speed gamers around the world, Zelda fans alike, and tournament fans. You are tuned into a very early match, 7:30 a.m. Eastern Time, between shadyforce and Illus. I am Eudaimonistic, joined today by Marjevich. How are you doing today, Marjevich?
What is this? 7:30? It's 1:30 p.m., my man. This is like prime time rando time. Unfortunately, not very frequently, though.
Hey, we are randoing around the world. We are an international tournament, and you're absolutely right about that. So, hello, good afternoon to you out in the European time zones. For us in the States, it's very early. But these two are ready to go with Game 3 of their series, with the only change to the game settings from default being maps and compasses. I'm very excited for that.
Oh, yeah, this is certainly the change I would say affects the most this tournament. Since you don't know the information about the dungeons, you will have to find a map for that, and the dungeons are worth more, potentially due to 2 additional items.
And of course, they don't know necessarily which dungeons are which, besides, the actual dungeon itself that they're walking into. They don't know if it's going to be a crystal or a pendant until they find that map for that dungeon. So you can find that anywhere in the overworld, anywhere in any of the dungeons, potentially even on the boss of that dungeon. So we may see an oops all dungeons here. Seeing lots of representation from all over the world in chat. Happy to hear that. I mean, I imagine, unless you're an early riser on a Sunday here in the States, it's probably most of you guys elsewhere in the world.
Well, we have representation from all over the world, as we also have representation from all these different sprites from all these different games and other stuff. Randomizer is truly something that just brings us all together until we're forced to do AGA 1 and complain about blue balls again.
Absolutely. And we're seeing a little bit of interesting stuff out of the file name here. Check Lake Island. shadyforce calling back to the boots on Hylia Island earlier in their series. We find a blue bottle in Link's house. I didn't see the sanctuary.
I don't think that was anything of worthwhile value. There are no repeats, no bombs, and apparently it was a compass.
And chat filling is in that it was Misery Meyer's compass. We'll see shadyforce heading towards his tier 1 tree pole, which is going to be bombs today, very conveniently. Illus will be able to find this information out just as well in Lost Woods.
Yeah, and Illus doing the start that he has done leading up to this tournament, saying start skipping Lumberjack and just going straight into Lost Woods. We do have a hookshot on Uncle today. I feel like these early hookshots just keep on showing up.
An early hookshot being a massive boon to anybody who doesn't have boots. One of the fastest ways to travel overworld and dungeons. So shadyforce with an early movement advantage. We'll see if that pays out, or if shadyforce is just going to go from Sanctuary and be chasing off after Illus's tail.
Now, normally if you don't have enough bombs when you're done with the Lost Woods, you tend to save and quit, then go to Link's house, and then you take that path to Kakariko, checking the bushes and hoping to get some bombs. Illus did get enough bombs, but that means he's not gonna have that bottle from Link's house on his first Kakariko visit.
Yeah, and an essential progression item there could take quite a while to come back for. Bottles being 4 of them in the entire item set might not be even available till an hour from now, if for any reason Illus doesn't stop by Link's house soon.
It's a long way to walk, and you will probably be checking other item locations. Early Shroom. Okay, these are just kind of one-off quest items, or fetch quest items in a sense, but that cape and the hookshot, I don't know. I'm already feeling the AGA one at this point, unfortunately.
Yeah, we may not have a lamp to logically access it, but if there are no other ways, we would probably see both runners attempt the Dark Hyrule Castle climb, as that would be a massive advantage to be able to get to the Dark World early in that scenario.
The thing with this early Shroom, I don't think we've seen it too much this tournament, but I believe that Illus is one of those players who tend to, once he's done with CAC, go and fake, that's a good bottle by the way, go and fake Flipper at the swamp, so that you can just straight go to Witch's Hut and just hand it in immediately before checking anything else.
You're absolutely right that that's rarely seen. Of course, some people will attempt to save scum it by, saving and quitting before they head that direction. But if you're going to do all of them in a chain and not worry too much about things like fake powder for the magic bat or even just for health, it's definitely a valuable way to route that in.
Illus doesn't have enough rupees, so I can't check Bottle Merchant just yet. So I'll have to walk a bit back for that later. Shadyforce has no rupees at all.
Yeah, some poor misfortunate luck, and will potentially be an issue if Bottle Vendor has something important. Of course, you always want a lot of rupees early on, but knowing this game, I wouldn't be surprised to see a 300 right after they leave the village.
Yeah, that tends to be the case, unfortunately.
Well, having found that fortunate bottle, we'll get the bottle item turn in is a compass to Eastern Palace. So compasses and maps and compass shuffle will also tell us the item count within a dungeon, which is useful, but not necessarily that important for top tier runners.
Okay, that 5 rupee there in the back, that's just taunting them at this point. 5 rupees away from Bottle Merchant, and Illus is gonna go buy bombs.
Yeah, it's a smart decision, seeing as you're not going to be able to get the bottle vendor, and you may as well have as many as you can for the rest of the overworld checks which require them. We do not have a weapon yet, so this is potentially a mini Moldorm play, seeing as he doesn't have that hookshot yet.
Yeah, that is certainly a good tell on the situation. So I wonder if Illus is just gonna leave the merchant and go and check it later. That seems to be the case.
Certainly doesn't have the boots to get 20 more for that big 20 on the library shelf. We'll check to see what the race game is, and opting not to just dive through it, we'll actually go back because that is a power glove, and we're not going to skip that.
Yeah, that's kind of always required in this game if you want to beat it. So we'll have to go back for that. This does mean we could see Back of Escape be checked immediately after this. It also does put Sora in logic, but with their current rupee count, unless they do find a 300, I don't really think that's something we're gonna see soon.
Could this be another one of those fabled grind for money seeds? This is a possible thing on the table. Of course, there are many locations left to check, both Eastern Palace area with Sahasrahla and the dungeon itself, and of course many Moldorm Cave and Ice Rod Cave. So with the dam as well, plenty of things that we're going to do before we resort to that.
It is quite rare to see a seed where you actually have to go and farm hundreds of rupees to go and check Sora. Illus will go and check the Back of Escape now, though.
Bag of Escape, very oftentimes forgotten by a lot of runners. Kind of a mainstay of old standard mode, which you don't see too often. One of the toggleable settings, actually, for this tournament, which we did not see from either of these runners.
And we have had a few standard mode races here. We also do see shadyforce skipping the Bottle Merchant as well, and we'll have to go back and get those gloves.
Holy mackerel, some protection from both projectiles and the Dark World Bunny sprite. We get a Moon Pearl and a shield, as well as a small key out of our Back of Escape, which means that you would be able to, with the lamp, go backwards through there and get the Dark Cross item.
Certainly something we could see a bit later. We are seeing the mushroom actually being delayed until later, but Illus is opting to start with Mini Moldorm Cave. This is also something that we've seen a bit more and more. And I'm not fully certain on how you go about this, if you just go Ice Sword Cave and Fake Flipper, or you go westwards and kind of have to force yourself into doing some Ancilla Splash Delete Fake Flipper to go check Ice Sword Cave later.
Yeah, we're in a tough position to pull off an ancillary glitch. We would need to have some other kind of projectile. The bombs are definitely one component of it, but a bow would be very helpful for that end.
I mean, you take the boost regardless, they are kind of good to have.
I'm trying to think, you can't use the blue boomerang to do the splash deletion. You need the red one if you're going to use that instead, right?
I'm pretty certain you do need the red, yes.
Still, though, it's very enticing to have boots in this scenario. Illus will actually double back towards the dam, which is an interesting choice. A lot of people would continue on to Ice Rod Cave knowing that they can fake Flipper, but I think the lack of rupees may be inspiring this decision.
It does certainly put Ice Rod Cave currently in a bit of an orphan location. and it's going to be quite tricky to route in later. Shadyforce is starting with the dam.
Now, in a perfect ideal world, you get all the progression you need to eventually come back here instead for, when you're doing Swamp Palace, but I don't think I've really met too many people who actually go through and avoid this Sphere 0 or Sphere 1 check. We'll get a nice example of hookshot clipping. Shadyforce taking advantage of the fact that a moving block is actually considered a different kind of sprite and able to latch onto the chest to get all of these items in one go instead of having to exit and re-enter.
And Illus is going for a Gina, which can also be like Ice Sword Cave, a bit tricky to route in. It's just that Ice Sword Cave is just kind of the meta and has been the meta to go because we start at the dam and go eastwards. Though sometimes that Gina's Cave just tends to have something that is quite nice.
Yeah, I think that qualifies.
So, we are a lamp away from Aga 1, but you have a solid weapon. It seems like Illus is just opting for escape now with that weapon in hand.
Yeah, Aghanim 1 play technically possible at this point. Not in logic, as you mentioned, we still need the lamp, but certainly things that are running in the back of these players' minds. That's not a fun find.
We do have the eastern area open, with Sahaswala there for 3 additional items. Sora is in logic as well, and we have the mushroom delivery.
I gotta say, though, the prospect of lampless, something that we're seeing much more these days than we may have seen in earlier days of the tournament, with a sword, considerably easier to do.
Oh, absolutely, since you can just use the sword to kind of guide you around the rooms.
You could alternatively pick up some projectiles, like, say, a bomb, or if you have the Cane of Samaria, you could use that to help guide yourself. The sword is infinitely better to use. It's just so much easier to tell where you are in the room, how you're moving against walls. Our Ice Rod Cave was worth skipping for today, 20 rupees.
So when I did go through those locations, we do still have Bottle Merchant that hasn't been checked, and we do have Cane of Burnout that doesn't really do anything because we have the cape already. And I just hope that the players don't forget about that merchant, because it very well could happen.
Yeah, Shady's in a good position to do it, but instead we'll head up the mountain Bonk Rocks. This is along the way to the mountain, potentially going to Kakariko instead, but definitely making a direction that looks like mountain.
Well, that's only a bug net. That's not particularly useful. And yeah, goes back to Kakariko to check that Bottle Merchant.
It's a smart decision. I definitely agree with it. If you're not sure, you definitely don't want to regret that later, and it's kind of annoying to get back to unless you find the flute conveniently.
Well, that's not really required. We did see Illus find the map to Ice Palace, so we will have that information when they do enter the Dark World.
If I'm going to get scammed, though, I think I'd rather have a 50% scam instead of like a 20% or a 2. Wait, what's 1 out of 20? Yeah, a 5 rupee return. At least you got like half your money back.
Early morning math is hard, I know. I feel you, man.
All that EU bias towards better mathematics during noontime hours.
I mean, I can do math, but I need time to think, and when you do commentary, you can't really think. Trust me, I know.
That's why I'm so glad that the runners do all the thinking. We're just talking about it.
Yeah, we have the easy job. 3 bottles? Already?
2 of which were empty to start with. Pretty friendly. I wonder if we're going to see either of these runners check their fountain items when they do make their way to the Wishing Well.
Shadyforce didn't talk to Sahaswala to get the green pendant information, right?
He did not, and that's an interesting choice. That might reflect Shadyforce not remembering that that's an option for him, because normally you wouldn't bother doing that since you can just check the map. Seeing as we need to find that map in this scenario, it's actually pretty handy to be able to do it with Sahaswala.
And that is interesting, since Illus won Game 2, it's Shadyforce who made a change to the map and compass shuffle.
Well, we'll find out later on if he ends up making the wrong decision by not checking that. He may just intend to clear this. I mean, he doesn't have a bow anyway, so maybe that's part of his consideration.
Well, there is nothing at Dark Cross, so at this point, what we have left is Eastern and Sora.
Now, one thing I do like about Shadyforce's decision to go all the way into Eastern is that if he feels comfortable in the dark in the back half, he could actually farm some rupees back here.
Okay, so Illus checks the island today and gets that information, and this is basically the best opportunity to check it. If you didn't go for Fake Flipper, just run down, get that info. If you need bombs, you go buy bombs while there as well.
Yeah, Boots Water Walk definitely makes it a less painful check to make, but if you're already in the neighborhood heading this direction, there's no better time.
I did forget about the mushroom, and we do have green pennant over in desert.
Well, it'll be a while before we have access to that without a book. We would definitely need a much larger combination of items if we're going to take the Dark World entrance, or the pseudo entrance. Consider the mirror to be a component of that. So it might be a while before Sahazrla gets his pendant back, unfortunately.
Did Shadyforce find the big key?
I don't believe so.
He did, and that's a fire rod.
Whoa, that's a very nice find for this dungeon. If we had the bow, it would be even better.
It doesn't really put much in logic, though. It puts Dark Cross, but we've checked that. That was a heart container. So, I mean, it's a nice item, but what does it unlock in terms of logic?
Yeah, we would have this entire dungeon if it weren't for the lack of bow, because that does now in version 31, it is considered a means to accessing the dark room in the back. We did have Big Key early in the dungeon, so technically speaking, you would be able to get to Armos. Unfortunately, without that bow, we're a little bit out of luck.
But this does mean that we have progression either on Mushroom or on Sora, because I believe everything else has been checked on.
Yeah, based on logic, we've been all the way to Agina's even, which was an important sword find. Shadyforce is doing this swordless at the moment.
And this is why Shadyforce is going to go here and farm rupees, I imagine. He's just going here into the rupee room to prepare for Sora. And this is really rare to see.
Yeah, you will occasionally see something like this in a different, like a newer runner's NMG run, potentially, to get maybe an extra bottle or something like that. But yeah, a room that you typically don't see. We call this DLC for the early game.
Could see Houlihan actually set up to get those 225 rupees here to be able to afford that. Shadyforce seems to be heading towards Agina. Does have the gloves, so you can actually check this rock here on the way and farm rupees there as well.
Yeah, that's a very commonplace. Most people who played this game have at some point farmed on that spot, as that was kind of a mainstay of my own childhood personally. But it's a very reliable place, and you only need a power glove to get to it. Looks like Illus will be finishing up all of the items here in Eastern Palace as well, so even with the sword, Dark Room is pretty easy to conquer here.
Shadyforce is skipping that cave, could go back later, but still has the front of escape to do as well, which Illus has finished.
Well, we get a nice big key skip for Illus there, getting to the Piece of Heart, which is, I believe, our last item of the dungeon. Of course, now with Maps and Compass Shuffle, dungeon item counts are not the same. You do not expect to find your map and compass in the same dungeon. So every item location is much more valuable in that sense, although could just be another map or compass for somewhere else.
Absolutely. We're gonna see Illus and now do the fake flipper. It's a very easy setup there by just bonking on that statue. It sets you up perfectly.
And a relatively uncommonly seen used Whirlpool as well. One that's probably more useful for most runs in the Dark World to get towards Lake Hylia Island, but it's a very nice set of game knowledge to be able to be heads up enough to recognize that there's a mushroom opportunity here.
Illus did have a very good performance in the Cross Keys tournament earlier this year, and that Whirlpool is used very frequently to allow us to bypass Aga 1 in the seed.
Well, speaking of bypassing Aga 1...
So I just assume Illus is just gonna go straight to Hype Cave at this point. Shadyforce has farmed up enough rupees for Sora and will probably route that in after the hammer.
Yeah, there is the opportunity, of course, if you wish to go to the Village of Outcasts instead. It mostly depends on how you intend to do the Dark World Overworld. And Illus appears to be, based on having that hook shot, willing to go to the right and north and then sweep around west, which is smart.
Pendant Ice Palace, so we have 2 pendants already.
And of course, from Sahasrahla earlier, we found out that that is not a green pendant, so better knowledge to have if you already have those 2 things kind of assembled, instead of worrying about a map check you kind of already know by process of elimination.
We'll find our first medallion here in Quake, which may or may not be required. We'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, that's another aspect of Maps and Compass Shuffle that doesn't really seem obvious at first glance. Is you don't necessarily know which of these which of the required medallions for dungeons are even necessary in the first place, because we might not find out about their requirement until we literally get to the boss.
So Shadyforce skipped out on Sora, but instead of just going straight to Hype Cave, just went and checked the island just to make sure there's nothing there, and then goes into the Dark World.
You gotta live up to your file name in this scenario.
I don't think either of them wants to lose to something being on that island today. But Illus didn't talk to the big bomb dude, correct?
I do not believe so.
So we don't have that 5-6 information. It's a long dig for nothing.
Yeah, getting all the drops, and unfortunately the last one being 10 arrows. Thankfully, the game does inform us via a chime, excuse me, for which one is the actual pull. Same thing with chess games, which is handy. Vanilla game would just be, a piece of heart, you would know.
Yeah, it also does bounce a little bit longer than your regular item as well, but they did add that little sound effect to it for the randomizer just to make it easier.
Well, Illus taking the time to check that bonk rock item being, of course, the bug net, which is probably not that important to us. There are some scenarios in which you might want a bottle fairy, and we do in fact have 3 bottles to work with, one of them being a blue potion. This does make Palace of Darkness a more appealing play out of Hype Cave. It looks like neither of our runners opted to go that direction.
Yeah, Illus is just confirming to see, do I have to do Aga 1 this seed? Could opt to sequence break up to Death Mountain. In terms of pod, Illus is a known hater of Palace of Darkness under basically any and all circumstances, especially when it's a pendant. I don't expect him to go there for some time.
I can feel that sentiment on a spiritual level.
He does know that there's only 1 pendant left, but it could still be pod, and even then, you don't have the bow, you have enough tools to do Skull Woods, and odds are it's a crystal.
Yeah, so a testament to the heads-up routing from both of our runners. Now, one thing to notice that's very different between the two at the moment, Shadyforce is nearly all the way to Zora money, thanks to Eastern Palace farming and the various other rupees picked up. So if there is something important on Zora, Shadyforce has a nice advantage towards that.
That is true, and that is another thing about the pod. Illus doesn't have enough rupees to enter pod at this point.
That is the worst feeling on earth. At least in NMG, you can count on like stun prizes giving you at least 1 rupee.
And we are seeing Illus though opt to not do Skull Woods at this point. Possibly because he doesn't know if it's a pendant or a crystal, possibly because Fighter Sword Hammer Mafia isn't particularly the nicest fight in the world. And I think we've found almost all the compasses at this point. They just keep on rolling in.
We are certainly approaching critical mass in that respect. I am a little surprised as well about the lack of Skull Woods. We do have Half Magic and Fire Rod with a blue potion, so maybe that is something about logic being a decision being made on that premise, more so than the ability to complete it. I think both of these runners should be able to pull it off.
You could say, do the checks here, go north, Skull Woods, get to Bumper Cave because you have the cape, and then you could use a bomb to set up fake flippers over at the river and head on over eastwards to do, say, Catfish. Or Pod if you want to do that. Check the pyramid item along the way. That is a possibility.
Ah, yes, the fabled kern jump. Well, things are illuminating quickly in this seed. We have both fire sources. The second, of course, being the lamp here in Thieves Town, which is a really nice quality of life find. You don't expect your opponent to have made very many dark room checks besides the ones that you would have made at this point. Potentially going up the mountain would be one of them, but knowing that it's in logic already, kind of a nice peace of mind.
Absolutely, and does put the Death Mountain into logic. Not much you can do up there, but there's still items there.
Yeah, thanks to that hook shot, we can get over the east side. That'll give us 7 items on the right side, but unfortunately, as you mentioned before, we don't have Titan's Mitts. We don't have... Well, we do have Hammer. We could make it all the way to Hera.
Yeah, I completely missed that, so there's a lot of stuff you can do up there.
But then again, as you're mentioning, though, without being able to do everything, it feels really bad. And we see a lot of runners in this tournament do that. They'll look to avoid going up there until they really can do just about everything, maybe except for Turtle Rock.
Even Spy Cave is in logic at this point.
That's a scary thought, less than half an hour in.
Yeah, definitely. The thing is also that they don't have Mirror or Flute to quickly get around the Light and Dark World, so when you set a foot into the Dark World, you kind of want to do as much as possible, because to get back in, you'll have to refine the portal and walk all around the world again. You do have boots to make it faster, but considering the location of the boots, you know that your opponent also have them, so you're not really moving faster since you're moving at the same speed as your opponent.
Yeah, and I fully agree with both of their choices to complete all of Thieves Town while we have the hammer, we have everything we need. We have at least a sword. If we had Cane of Samaria, maybe it'd be, a little bit less appealing, as the weapon for blind, but I'm pretty sure both of these two can handle it. The one thing that's concerning me is that Shadyforce has way less health to work with than Illus. Every heart in Thieves Town really goes a long way.
I do believe they picked up a blue potion, but possibly they may want to save that potion in case they have to go into pod without the bow.
And given our lack of access to Misery Mire and Swamp Palace,
Shadyforce, you don't have a key for that door, sorry.
He wanted the dream to be real.
And yeah, back to Swamp. You can't really do much there.
Yeah, so I mean, like, a lot of these Dark World dungeons, certainly not accessible to us now. So, I mean, while we would hope to find some really nice progression here in Thieves Town, and the lamp is progression, they're probably hoping for more so that they could do more in the dungeons. Right now, this potential Palace of Darkness play for Potion Camera Unlock glitch might just be necessary. So, I think both of them are probably considering their health walking into this blind fight. Although, if they're on script, it doesn't matter anyway.
Yeah, and if you're top 128 in this tournament, you definitely know the script. Shadyforce skipped that one heart in that room and just opting for this one.
He says, no shoutouts to no Sankart. I don't need any of that extra health.
I mean, these fights look like pretty much the script,
Yeah, besides a little bit of extra damage in Phase 3 for Illus, certainly a very good fight. Shadyforce on pace as well.
Of course, the last pendant. Okay, so we know the crystal's the seed.
That feels a little bit like a kick in the teeth. But certainly a powerful pendant at that.
Yeah, that
or is that a wisdom pendant?
I don't know how the colors work in this game, how they decide upon them, but it's definitely powerful and it's definitely very wise. Unfortunately, Shadyforce did not talk to Sahasrara, but Illus now knows every single crystal dungeon in the game and will probably go straight to Skullwoods.
Yeah, having the knowledge mode. I guess if you don't intend to try to follow up with the north or to go east from here, it makes a lot of sense to check this first. So this might be revealing Illus's route here, intending to potentially save and quit out of this once Skull Woods is done.
That does seem to be the case, and we'll probably start with the early checks then.
Another thing that's really nice about this routing is that if you get kind of messed over with the way that the version 31 Skull Woods logic works, you could get locked out on accident trying to do this dungeon differently, because the room with the mummies to the right, where Illus is at, no longer has a forced small key. So it's possible you need to save and quit to leave this dungeon. So Illus kind of covering all bases.
And Shadyforce is doing the same route here. I imagine we're gonna see the follow-up here into Death Mountain, because it has the most locations.
Whoa!
That flute is pretty big.
Of course, for logical implications, we do need that Titan's Mitts before it does anything for us, since we did find that lamp. But the fast travel alone is an amazing feel. Shadyforce going to... Did he find the big key? Okay, yeah, so he gets a small key out of it.
Illus was actually locked out by keys there, I think, left after 3 items. Couldn't go and full clear it.
But then again, though, I mean, it kind of shows why they both check that that cape first, the cape location. So, I mean, smart heads-up play from both of them. Shadyforce just kind of doing this a little bit slower to try and make sure that he doesn't end up in that position. We'll get the flute pretty quickly, but we'll actually end up activating it later than Illus in this scenario.
Yeah, but Shadyforce gets to clear out Skull Woods here, and Illus knows that it's a crystal, but we'll have to go back later.
Fortunately, it's pretty quick to get to the back half, particularly when you don't got to worry about checking everything else in the front. So certainly not the worst thing to do. If you needed something for, say, like Turtle Rock and it was on Mothula, it would work out pretty nicely.
And I just feel a bit bothered by Illus not being able to do this dungeon in one go. It could be intentional and not really wanting to risk the Mothula fight. I don't know. They clearly know what they're doing because they're this far into the tournament.
Yeah, calculated gamble, and we'll see if Mothula from... Because it looks like Shadyforce will complete the rest of this dungeon. We'll find out if Mothula has something really important for us.
Yeah, and Illus just climbing the mountain. Lots of stuff to do up here.
I think it would be hilarious if the old man gives us our vanilla mirror, though, because that would actually be really handy for Illus in this scenario.
I mean, you just go straight into the Tower of Hera and get that done, but not today.
Well, we'll get to see if Shadyforce's, well, this is definitely not the NMG setup, but we'll get to see if his Skullwood's Mummy Hellway is any good. We'll probably just burn everything down if I had to guess, though.
Yeah, plenty of magic. You have 16 shots with half magic, so that's plenty.
Wow, Shadyforce, not a coward, going to actually ignore most of those mummies, which is arguably much more difficult.
We'll enter the fight with full health as it is. We'll start with Spy Cave and then probably save and quit after that, and then check the right side.
Well, as you mentioned before, it's a very low percent, I guess, or early spike check for a lot of scenarios, and we'll see if that's something critical. It's definitely a smart thing to do while you're here.
Well, it's definitely in logic. They've been given all the items for maybe something that is required.
Can I get an oof in chat for the bombos, which might actually be necessary here?
As Shadyforce picks up their first crystal from Mothula.
Definitely a scary fight. Smart of Shadyforce to take advantage of the way that Link moves strafes, basically, with the sword to try and line up some fire rod shots, taking advantage of the full magic, all of the magic meter that he had available.
Still have one chest left to check here. So far, I hasn't gotten anything apart from that flute.
I'm pretty certain this is going to be a key based on, because I believe Skullwoods gives you one extra key if you get everything.
Based on professional Twitch chats, yes, that's a key.
I just remember how much I hated that dungeon growing up, and now when we play Rando, it just seems so easy. Is that the last medallion?
Yes, Illus has found the last medallion in Ether. So Illus doesn't have to worry about that. And Shadyforce doesn't really either, as long as they decide to go to Spy Cave.
Well, quite the magical turn of events. We'll find a map for Swamp Palace as well here in the Paradox Cave. And we'll find a whole lot of not much else except for another map of Eastern Palace.
Well, that's the interesting thing. The maps don't really do anything for Illus unless he decides to put priority on the 5-6 crystals, because we don't know their location. But for Shadyforce, not knowing that Desert is upended, will probably still go around and check the map and lose a bit of time from that.
And that's a underrated aspect of this. Depending on whether or not you use a tracker that indicates these things, you may or may not spend the time to track those locations. You might check 6 or 7 times. Personally, I would end up checking it 6 or 7 times. So, I mean, those are little time saves, but for Illus, that's a great knowledge advantage.
Oh yeah, and there was a map up there on the mountain island. And if Shadyforce goes for that, that's more than just a few seconds that it will take to check that, because there's a few door transitions and a mirror you have to use.
And the shame of finding out you didn't need it.
The shame in it is the Ganon's Tower map.
That's brutal.
Yeah, unfortunately those maps are also shuffled and they don't do anything at all.
I gotta think that somebody on this mountain, perhaps this old man, is something of a cartographer. We have found, I believe, 4 so far here on the mountain.
Well, he's the only one that lives up here, right? And those 2 dudes or whatever who accidentally entered the Dark World.
Yeah, perhaps they should have consulted his maps before getting trapped there.
When you think about it, there's not a whole lot of people who live in Hyrule. Only like, I don't know, 50?
And I swear, none of them pay their taxes. You find so much money in Kakariko.
And Sora just gets super rich off of them.
Yeah, there's some kind of pyramid scheme going on here when you get to the Dark World.
In Shadyforce, you jumped one step too far there and missed Spy Cave, unfortunately.
Of course, he may decide to go right back into it. I mean, it seems like a logical thing to do, but that's a rough time loss here.
And the hookshot out, maybe just decide to not check it? As Illus kills Moldorm.
I like the decision to go east instead, seeing as once you've done Tower of Hera, it's very easy to drop right down.
And we have a small key locked in the basement of Hera as Illus picks up his first crystal.
Well, that puts us 1-1. Shadyforce getting the nice advantage out of Skull Woods, not having to go all the way to the northwest corner again, whereas Illus is definitely springboarded ahead here on Death Mountain. We'll go back in for the basement item.
No, it doesn't have the key. Illus, there are some interesting things going on for our players today. Maybe it is too early in Europe as well.
So I believe logically that means there is a small key down there.
Yes, there's a small key down there.
I'd be a liar to say I don't do it myself. Whenever you change settings for these games, so I mean, like, a lot of people out there play this game casually, just rando, open mode all the time. When you change settings, it can be very disorienting.
Oh, absolutely. It happens to the best of us. And if Illus doesn't find myths here, he will have to leave, because he's done with the mountain.
Yeah, it feels pretty rough to have the hookshot and not be able to get hookshot cave out of it. And if we had Titan's Mitts, we'd be able to open up Turtle Rock, actually.
T-Map was up here after all. I guess Illus is gonna flute to somewhere now.
Hard to say exactly what the next best choice is. The lack of Titan's Myth, it's kind of hurting here for overworld exploration. Zora is on the table if we can get the rupees for it, but Illus is actually very short.
We're gonna see Skull Woods be the first thing to be cleared here.
Well, this does present shadyforce some time to catch up. I would say that Skullwood's completion, seeing as Illus hasn't checked the rest of the back half, is pretty time-consuming compared to a Tower of Hera climb.
Illus could make up some time by not opening the chests that have small keys that he won't need, so there is that. But where will he go after this? And where will Shadyforce go?
Well, we were talking about it earlier. Both have preserved their bottle with potion in it, so that is on the table. Both could also consider a water walk glitch to check the wishing well. Shadyforce much more likely to do so, having the Zora money to boot.
Yeah, Sora's been in logic this whole time. You have Catfish, but you can't route them two in together. Pyramid, Pod.
We could see the very gutsy gamble and hoping for mirror on Catfish, but that's quite the pipe dream.
Oh, yes. But that could also be where Illus is going. If he goes for the bomb jump into Fake Flipper.
Yeah, and going from west to east to grab that much more convenient than, say, walking past Palace of Darkness, which has so many items. We did see a really nice bomb jump out of Shadyforce's second today so far. Illus pulling off a similar maneuver in Tower of Hera as well. So both of them are 100% so far.
Yeah, they're executing it very nicely. One more hit with the hammer will do the trick. And Illus is now going for the back first, which would be an indicator that he is going to continue the Dark World route.
Yeah, we did see Illus earlier grab the flute, but didn't check all of the chests in the front half. There was still the big chest as well as the room to the right of that. So Illus will probably end up looking for that chest closer to the boss, the first one in the back half. Hard to say. I mean, when you're coming back for a second time so early in the seed, it would not be surprising to see someone forget which ones they've opened.
Illus has a compass and 2 items picked up in the dungeon. What am I saying, compass? No, the compass is shuffled. Well, maybe it was in here, I don't know. I don't know. Does anyone remember what a Skullwood's compass was?
I would honestly be shocked if anybody was tracking compasses, although we do have a tracker today.
Well, there's probably that one person who is going through the VOD right now just to prove me wrong.
But while we're on the subject of tracking things, big thanks to Oski for doing the tracking today. Always nice to have somebody keeping us honest.
This looks like a Palace of Darkness to me for Shadyforce.
And fluting to 5 to get there. Of course, if we had an Aghanim 1 portal at the castle gate, we would potentially consider doing that instead. But this is the fastest way with flute and hammer and gloves. So Shadyforce launching right into Palace of Darkness with no other stops first.
And Illus is picking up a potion here. Wait, did Illus just leave after Mothula?
Yes, absolutely.
Oh dear. Well, there are no other items there, but if this comes into last location scenario, that's probably a spot Illus is going back to.
I'm more concerned or more confused, I guess, by Illus's choice to buy a green potion. That is the least expensive potion, so if it was for the potion camera unlock glitch, certainly a wise decision, for cost reasons, but that puts us even further away from Zora money, and we do still have that blue potion as far as I remember.
So, we're bow locked in Pod. So that means Pyramid, Catfish, or Zora has the progression?
And by the looks of things, either something that gets us into another dungeon or bow. Although we don't have the mirror, so there are a lot of things that are currently locked behind that if we had a mirror would be able to check afterwards. It'd be very time consuming as well.
if you do find something here, you may be able to decipher where the bow is, which is very valuable information.
Yeah, one of the lesser spoken of, factors involved with doing these glitches, the potion camera unlock glitch here, of course, taking advantage of the potion interrupting camera movement during a super tile transition, which allows us to trick the game into basically thinking the mimics aren't even there, even though they are technically there. So the door trigger lets us through because it thinks, hey, you already killed them.
Only one key over on right side?
I like shadyforce's decision to continue from this side, seeing as we don't have a mirror for the alternative to a death ward. Having the boots can actually allow you to bonk off of this spot and get pretty much everything all in one go. It's a really smart use. And hot on shadyforce's heels is Illus doing the exact same sequence.
Yeah, they're both gonna be checking everything here. If they get a sequence broken bow, they're gonna finish off the dungeon. And I'm not really so sure they'll be able to find a bow locked behind a bow, but that could always be the case.
Yeah, seeing as version 31 does change bows to progressive bows, that's definitely a possibility. I gotta ask though, Marjevich, how does a boo fall down a pit?
Well, you see, that question is based on a false conclusion that boos actually fall. They just kind of float downwards very quickly.
They're just much better aviators than I ever thought.
Yeah, that's why they are boos. Illus, you need to throw that bomb a little differently. There we go.
Oof.
That was close.
Unfortunately, no big key in our possession at the moment. So without that, we can't. We're probably not going to see a hammer jump out of anybody here.
Probably not. We do have plenty of keys now, though.
I am honestly shocked to see that Illus is not farming up all of these rupees right now.
Illus is definitely working under the assumption that Sora is a bait and will not go there.
Well, in the case they wanted to prove me wrong, they could do a north side bomb jump, although I don't think Illus is going to do that since we do have the lamp. It's actually much more convenient to go through this dark maze.
But Illus is definitely in the risk-taking zone after skipping out on locations now in Skull Woods after clearing that dungeon. Or just find 300 and be done with it.
Wow, that's good fortune.
Well, they had to show up at some point, and mail upgrade, but it's another day with Pod having nothing.
Which is very painful to deal with. We did find out that it was a crystal, but without that bow, we are completely dead in the water there. But fortunately, with all of those rupees, something else to consider as well is that Illus has pretty much spent all of the money they will need to for the rest of the race, with the exception of Zora, so pretty easy to find 17 more rupees for Zora at this point.
So where are you going, Illus? Is this a way to get to Pyramid?
My question is that faster than the portal over by Link's house?
I don't know. I've actually never seen this before, but I imagine it's faster. Maybe it's the boots, because you can run in a much straighter line or something? I don't know.
I think without boots, it would be much slower.
I don't know. But there's a reason why they're doing it, and it's probably because it's faster.
And we'll finally get an example of spin speed here. Illus taking advantage of a 1.0 exclusive glitch where if you hit the dash button, the frame after you release a sword spin, the game doesn't really understand what movement speed Link should be moving at, and upon touching a manual staircase, the game will store the wrong value and you'll walk at running speed. taking great advantage of that to get through the pyramid item very quickly, which was unfortunately a bust, but we will get to see Catfish while Shadyforce here is taking a dive into the front half of Escape.
Which we know from Illus doesn't really have anything of value, so this is some time that Illus is gonna gain on Shady here.
I can't expect Shadyforce to be too proud of his 48-minute escape, though.
I've seen worse. But if this isn't something, I think Sora is going to be abandoned for quite some time because we have other things to do.
Oh, but that is something.
So do you start by checking the Mire area? Do you go Dark Death Mountain? You have the Smith Chain, but that's probably not going to be a thing because you don't have the mirror and it's super slow.
I really feel like this is one of those scenarios where the item calculus of maps and compass shuffle really messes with your head, because Misery Mire would typically only be 2 items, but there are so many chests in here. You know, I mean, you do add 2 potential extra items out of it, so it's a much more appealing play than it would normally be, let alone the overworld checks nearby.
Shadyforce here is taking a Death Warp to check Dark Cross. We do have Quake for Misery Mire.
And as a reminder to anybody strolling in late to the race who are potentially wondering where Bombos was, that was actually on Spike Cave on Dark Death Mountain, so we haven't seen a need for it just yet. Turtle Rock may still potentially pose a threat to Shadyforce in that respect, but otherwise we have definitely found a lot of medallions quickly in this race.
Yeah, they were all acquired super early.
One nice thing for Shadyforce in this scenario is that Dark Cross item took considerably less time to check, as Illus did that in the dark.
That is absolutely true. We are seeing Illus now dip into Mire. You do need to clear Mire, but that can't be done at this point. And Shadyforce is going into Spy Cave. I think that's the only thing left up here for them.
Yeah, definitely smart to make sure you don't leave it behind if it is something important. We did see a nice attempt at a sword climb. Unfortunately, Shadyforce gave up on that. A nice tech that you don't see too often.
So Shady will have all the medallions, and that's a good thing because you don't have to worry about them later. It's just a matter of, can Illus find something here in this first Mire dip? Because I would say this is the riskier call than just going to Dark Death Mountain and get the 6 items that are there and get the Turtle Rock information, because you're not going to a dungeon and don't really want to double dip. On the other hand, you don't really want to climb the mountain yet another time later for Turtle Rock.
And as you mentioned, I mean, you know, it's really important that Illus takes advantage of this item advantage. Shadyforce will probably not be going to Catfish quickly, and even if he does, it's going to take some time to get there to pick up those Titans mids. And every second that Illus gets of knowledge advantage between those 2 points is critical. Now, it doesn't feel so bad to come back to, Misery Mire, because if you already have the big key, it's pretty quick to get to the boss. But checking everything is arduous.
Like going here for the cutscene chest that Illus is doing.
Not the best feeling. Yeah, I hate to see it.
Yeah, and Shadyforce seems to be going for Pyramid into Catfish. Will take some time to get there, though.
Getting a really nice hammer dash to get through the bridge, which is excellent. Always feels good. That's one that, for whatever reason, I think pretty much everybody struggles with. Maybe it's just the guards on the bridge, but it's just not fun to do.
Aren't really that many locations where you do the hammer dash. The flippers open up locations where you also don't really do the hammer dash, but still kind of need the flippers to beat the game.
Well, as far as logic goes, neither of our runners really did too much with fake flippers. I mean, Illus did use fake flippers for overworld movement, but nobody checked anything with them. So kind of interesting to not see a sequence break fake flippers yet.
And Swamp now has 8 items in it. That's a lot of items.
Finding the flippers quickly is very nice. Now, a late mirror can potentially be doomed for a runner. If you're unfortunate enough to require more than one item after that, you could be sent into quite a tailspin of item location checks. There's a lot of random overworld stuff that requires it.
Oh, definitely. We are looking for that mirror. We're also looking for Kane, and we're looking for the bow as well for go mode.
Shadyforce showing us his displeasure, making sure the Quakefish feels a quake of his own with that bomb throw.
Maybe it just eats the bomb and it actually appreciates the gift.
I mean, he does hold Quake, and Quake is quite the explosion.
It certainly is. I mean, I don't know what catfishes eat, do you?
Today I learned that it's bombs. That there's no other answer than that in my mind now.
Hey. I'm not a professional on catfish ology something, I don't know.
Well, I hear they can also eat bushes and rocks, too. Maybe a stray signpost if you're a memer.
Are they vegetarian?
Are rocks a vegetable?
I don't know. What I do know is that Shadyforce is not going into Mystery Mire.
Yeah, that's an interesting choice. As you mentioned before, Dark Death Mountain has quite a few items, so we may end up seeing, it looks like Shadyforce is going to try and double down on mountain checks.
And I do think this is the safer call. It's just that he will have to go into Mire, but maybe he finds the Kane up here and then goes back. That would be pretty good.
Would have an opportunity to do the entire thing with the spooky action glitch, or the Ancilla glitch active as well. Illus had an opportunity, if he had the Cane of Samaria, to do the whole thing in one go that way. And we will actually see a Wishing Well check from Illus, giving us a bee in a bottle.
It's a good thing Illus got those 70 rupees that he didn't need, because he had 503 for Sora anyway.
Hashtag calculated. Question for you, Marjevich, do you know, is it a different Wishing Well or different bottle fill for each individual well?
I don't know. What I do know is that there's a bow on the ledge.
And we just found our flippers in Misery Mire, right?
Yeah, I think we kinda did, and Sora has a map. That map isn't needed for Illus. Oh, there's a sword though for Shadyforce.
That's pretty wild, though, that it took all the way until you went to Catfish to go to Misery Mire to go get this bow, which now allows for Palace of Darkness. I'm wondering if Helmasaur has something to complete this absolutely circus-like sequence.
Yeah, Helmasaur has an item. Armos has an item. We'll have to do them. That's the mirror. It seems like you get the myths and you suddenly get every single item in the game.
Yeah, it's certainly turning out that way. Shadyforce is going to reflect on the logic of that while reading up on it in his book.
Yeah, how about we just go and see which medallion we need for Turtle Rock and then head to Ether Tablet, or maybe not check? Oh yeah, we don't need to check that. We have all the medallions. It doesn't matter. Because Shadyforce did go to Spy Cave.
Well, Shadyforce hopefully going to end up being logic literate after getting that book. Will actually immediately head towards the tablet, which with his Master Sword upgrade that he just acquired is now accessible.
Yeah, you do have Bombo's tablet as well with the mirror book combination. I don't know. That sounds a bit too spooky, you know. You get both items right next to each other and they together unlock one location. It's a big thing, you know.
Perhaps the prevailing trend in the rando community that there's no way the game is this nice may end up coming back to bite.
Why did Shadyforce go into Tower of Hera and then immediately exit?
A part of me thinks he may have thought he still had that key. Or wait a second, yeah, he did finish it. Okay, yeah. I was thinking for a second there, wait, maybe he didn't.
There's definitely been some weird decisions, and it's either the hours or it's the map compass shuffle.
Well, despite getting the book, we're going to take the back entrance here, because with the mirror, it is much nicer for Desert Palace to have entrance from this side of the dungeon. We'll be able to warp back as soon as we're done.
And here is that important little thing. Shadyforce never talked to Sahaswala. They don't know that this is the green pendant.
And I can't imagine that Shadyforce is really trying that hard to finish Desert Palace unless, just trying to play to the safety choice of just
That's a
finishing it
required
anyway.
item, though.
Holy mackerel, everything's looking up for Shadyforce right now.
I guess it's another Ice Rod hunt.
By the looks of things, yeah, that's really the only required item. Obviously, he will end up getting flippers from Misery Mire, which is probably the very next check here.
Yeah, because now you have the cane and you can do that in one go. As the Illus finishes off Armos.
Well, this does put Illus at a 1 crystal advantage, plus the knowledge advantage. As we talked about before, not knowing which ones are crystals could end up biting Shadyforce pretty badly. Although Shadyforce definitely has a significant progressive lead when it comes to items.
Yeah, but if Shadyforce finishes this dungeon, they will have the same information as well, where all the pendant dungeons are. Because they've done Thieves Town and they also found the Ice Palace map. Assuming they've checked the map, I don't know.
I'm pretty sure Shadyforce hasn't. I'm remembering suddenly, though, that he has a mirror. Gotta take advantage of that. And speak of the map.
Yeah, doesn't know.
Honestly, I think I'd rather forget that I have a mirror than forget that I have boots. That's the most painful.
Rather not forget about an item location that has progression on it.
There are many ways to play yourself in this game.
Unfortunately, that is very true.
Well, Illus, doing his audition for the Matrix, barely dodging a 1.0 fireball, as dropping down into the rest of Palace of Darkness will knock out both of these dungeons in one go. Really smart usage of that portal, seeing as... the flute, seeing as he does not have the mirror yet to chain the two together the way that Shadyforce will.
Yeah, Shadyforce definitely going to gain some time there later when they opt to do that. I'm not quite getting that one cycle there with the Fire Rod.
Still probably faster than his normal NMG attempt. I don't think anybody out there feels comfortable with bow Molus with regular bow. So 2 cycle will be good enough for the pendant here. And I wonder if he's going to try and turn that in and then jump right into Palace of Darkness. It seems like a decent sequence of events. Still have Misery Mire available.
Yeah, probably starting off here with the Mr. Meyer. We'll get the flippers there and then Eastern Pod back to back. We will see from Illus if they get an item there or not, and then you can hand in the pendant after that.
So a part of me wonders now, since we are on an Ice Rod hunt, how gutsy are these two going to be? There is a chance that it's in Ice Palace, and that'd be the last place I think either of them want to go.
They're probably going to full clear every single dungeon up until that point. I guess the question for me is actually more, where will Illus go to look for the cane? Ice or desert?
Well, there is the one advantage that Illus has in this scenario, which is that a green pendant does look more appealing in general, and desert being pretty quick to do. I'm hoping that, for Illus's sake, that's where he ends up looking first, because it would be very painful to go to ice.
Oh, yes, definitely. It is a bit weird. We got all these big progression items up on Dark Death Mountain, and then simultaneously flippers being really big given the bow in Mire. And you could go either path around them, but I do have to say going the mountain is almost certainly the better call in this seed. Since you will have to do Mire in one trip instead of 2 that Illus will end up doing.
Well, we'll get to see a nice bow finish for Helmasaur King. Illus actually depleting most of his arrows, down to 4. may want to consider. Actually, that's a very good reason to go to Desert as well. Desert has a lot of arrows available, and that'd be a great place to restock.
Yeah, but to get access to that, you need the mirror or the book, and both of them are in Hookshot Cave. Illus is probably going to go to the mountain, doesn't really have many other options.
Yeah, by the looks of things, I mean, those flippers could send him to ice, and we hope not. So, yeah, getting the old man start here for the save and quit. Illus appears to be doing the exact sequence you mentioned, going to Hookshot Cave.
So you have to climb the mountain to get your desert access, to get your cane, so you can climb the mountain again.
There have been quite a few chains in this seed.
Yes, most definitely.
And ironically, not a lot of changes either. Just maps and compasses. I'm very surprised to see that in the Game 3 of this series. Both of these two hotly contending for their group. The winner of this series will end up going to face off against Shiva Hayes, and the loser of this match, I guess, in this series will end up facing off against Niterific, also in Group B. So Group B kind of shaking out with this race.
Yeah, this will definitely decide the direction that we're going. Illus is just going to open up Turtle Rock here. As it turns out, Spy Cave is required this seed.
Well, that decision from shadyforce to go back to Spike Cave may have been the saving throw for him in this scenario, because blast locationing that would have been extremely painful. Turtle Rock being basically the last place I think both of these runners are going to end up going.
And right now, we have a really close race on our hands. It may look like Illus is ahead, being 2 crystals up, but shadyforce, the mountain first, sets up a much better way to go about the dungeons, with only 1 trip to Mire and doing Eastern Pod back-to-back with the mirror. So we could have a really close finish here. That
Something else?
It may all be decided by either GT routing or whoever finds the Ice Rod first.
And that's kind of, where I'm expecting this to turn out to. As you mentioned, shadyforce does have a much better dungeon configuration to work with. Both of them did do all of Eastern Palace before jumping back in. So that plus Palace of Darkness being a fast finish, it may look like it's kind of lopsided in Illus's favor, but as mentioned, this could come out to be really close depending on where that Ice Rod is.
And also very much Illus going into Desert. But now you get these items that allow you to do Swamp. And may decide to go ahead and full clear Swamp after checking the Ether Tablet.
Well, I'm seeing some speculation in chat. Do you think either of these two are crazy enough to do a Turtle Rock dip without Ice Rod?
So I have 2 things to say to that. 1, Illus, I think, is almost certainly going to do it, and 2, I don't think it's crazy.
I mean, there are a ton of item locations in there. It just feels the worst when you lose out on it. So one thing that we've seen in the qualifiers as well as other races that have been going on in these series, is saving the portal from the laser bridge exit, and that could potentially be a way for somebody to end up back in there with the Ice Rod if it's found shortly thereafter.
Oh, definitely. I do actually think that the meta right now is to go Turtle Rock and look for the Ice Rod, if it's an Ice Rod hunt.
Yeah, I mean, it would be only one item, and as you'll see a lot of people talk about in the community, you kind of want to bias yourself towards decisions that would win you the race if they end up working out.
shadyforce is down to 2 hearts and have nothing in the bottles.
I'm actually kind of surprised to see that he didn't default to arrows here, having 30 of them. It'll take 8 arrows to finish off. Oh, that's right, he doesn't have his bow yet.
Yeah, he doesn't have that yet. That's a very scary D-cape, or whatever you want to call it. Almost got hit by the jumping eye.
And this is a very painful way to finish the fight. Smart of shadyforce to stick to the center of the room, as those jumps are much less predictable when you're going side to side. This is a veteran move from him.
We'll get Vitreous down, get a single rupee for that, and pick up crystal number 3, as Illus will go into Swamp.
So in this scenario, I think it's probably going without saying that you check the entire dungeon, you don't skip left side, right?
It's guaranteed 2 items there, and Illus is still looking for 2 items. And after this, you have an awkward smith chain, or not really that awkward anymore with the mirror. You have Desert, Bombo's Tablet, Ice Palace. Illus does have some skipped locations as well, like Skullwoods, but they are probably not going to be checked.
Yeah, because I can't really imagine a scenario other than deciding between that and Ice Palace in which you would feel like that'd be the better choice.
I don't really think anyone wants to do Pendant Ice Palace.
And it appears we're getting confirmation from chat that shadyforce has the Pyramid Fairy available, so that's actually a very natural continuation of this chain that he's doing now, entering Swamp, which is probably a very fortunate decision, as we'll find out shortly from Illus if our Ice Rod's here.
Oh yes, Swamp into Pyramid Fairy, then you hand in the Green Pendant, and then you do Eastern Pod after that.
Perhaps shadyforce is remembering the old days of NMG when you actually get the gold sword.
Ye olde days.
I mean, that's the way you'd do it. Instead of doing, you do Mire first and then come back to Swamp instead, so that you could just immediately head up to the Pyramid Fairy.
It is fascinating how some video games have had their speedruns developed over time.
And then, of course, all of those old hats are like, Randomizer. No, I'm kidding. There's a lot of people in the community who were very long time invested in NMG and other speedruns within those categories who played actually a developmental role in all of this. Some of them are admins of this tournament. Really speaks to how long of a legacy this game has.
Yeah, when did A Link to the Past Randomizer come out? Like 2016?
Maybe earlier than that. I think it's been at least 3 years now. The standalone executable version of it was at least 3 years old. That one being, of course, primarily developed by Desirect, and then VTorp kind of took over with the web version.
Wow, 3 years? That's older than me. We are seeing Illus here going left sides first, get the items that are over there.
So here's our left side swamp check. As I believe shadyforce is going to do the same thing, picking up the key just to make the 2 screen transition time save with the key that could be flooded. Hopefully we won't do that.
Now because of the look, I just remembered something. I said earlier that, oh yeah, shadyforce can do a Pyramid Fairy and then hand in the Green Pendant and then do Eastern Pod. No, the bow is still missing.
And that could end up being a really painful, item to end up finding, because, I mean, even though shadyforce is replete with rupees at this point, I mean, you don't really want to go to Zora after having already done Catfish. I mean, you have the mirror. This is not a location that's ideal.
Yeah, and Sora itself has been in Logic since forever. The other checks haven't. We'll probably go there before Nice Palace Dip though, just because it's right next to it.
Yeah, if it weren't for that whirlpool, it'd be a much more painful check.
Well, Shady's actually skipping left side swamp for now.
And is rewarded with a shovel.
We do have the cave south of Grove as well, so you can check that together with the shovel.
And it wouldn't be that awful to, combo that with the purple chest if you end up doing the smith chain. So a lot of overworld potential here for shadyforce to try and find that ice rod, but he's also looking for a bow. So that may actually impact whether or not he decides to dungeon dive instead.
If you decide to go and check those spots right now after Swamp, you may actually decide to just orphan Bombo's Tablet instead, because it's quite a bit to walk back there too.
Yeah, that would be a very painful thing to check. So I mean, portal preservation, definitely a consideration. We're seeing some really nice double spins or double grabs and spins for shadyforce here in this Argus fight, saving a considerable amount of time over Illus overall. Illus defaulting to 1 and slashes, which is definitely working pretty well at the same time. It's a shame we don't have Tempered Sword.
It's a damn shame indeed. So Shovel was the only thing out of this dungeon. I think that's a big key locked in the big chest, unless that was near the boss.
Yeah, I think you're right about that.
Yeah, it was locked. Let's check or open up the menu there to grab the mirror, and there is no big key there.
Oh, this is interesting. So shadyforce is going to knock out the Bombos tablet now, immediately after the dungeon. Definitely makes a lot of sense. You're already over there.
Yeah, this tends to be the best situation you have to check this. Now, if you want to talk about really, really awful item locations right now, Graveyard Ledge is probably #1.
Oh, that's the last place I'd be looking, and shiny shields notwithstanding, it's definitely still on the table.
Yeah, players don't really want that shield because of lag frames, but if you're forced to get it, you can't really do much about it.
However, it is pretty nice to see them nearly in sync, and they are probably going to continue in the same direction, it looks like. Ooh,
it's interesting how close yet so far apart they are.
I'm kind of second guessing though. Yeah, so Shady will actually do the big bomb right now, and Illus will end up getting the South of Grove check, so we may end up actually finding this Ice Rod. If either of them find their Ice Rod, they have a pretty hefty advantage over the other right now.
Yeah, but if Shady finds it here, they may climb the mountain, do Turtle Rock for nothing, and then after they find the bow, they have to climb the mountain again after that. So is it really that good to find the Ice Rod right now?
Yeah, when you put it that way, actually, yeah. I disagree that it would be an advantage. Thank you for changing my mind on that. Attending your TED Talk.
Oh, is Illus going desert here? Because that is definitely the call to make.
And that will reward us with that Cane of Samaria, as we saw before, and the ability to finish Misery Mire, potentially catapulting him into the front runner status here.
I'm gonna check checkerboard first and then see. Shadyforce picking up the powder. It does incentivize a bit more to go and do the Smith Chains. Do you really want to do the Smith Chain?
I mean, shoot, you pick up the shovel, the powder, you need both of those things, you got Titan's Mitts late. It feels appealing, but it also feels very wrong.
It does. So Shadyforce will dig, and skipping the Grove may mean that they are gonna do the Smith Chain. Yeah, this is gonna find Kane and be in Ice Rod mode.
Acquiring a Fable to dig, we'll be able to get the bomb cluster out of there, but we'll not end up getting any progression out of it. Ends up going to the mountain, though. As we talked about before, Turtle Rock.
Yeah, Shadyforce is doing a TR dip to look for bow and Ice Rod.
Now, that being said, he could find the other bow there.
That is definitely a possibility.
And given that you're really not going to skip much in Turtle Rock, even if you are in go mode, I mean, this might actually end up being the best play possible.
Yeah, it's this. Do the Sora checks and then go into Ice. Because if you're doing the Sora checks right now and you find nothing, you're basically saying, well, I guess I'm going Ice. Or Smith. Or Graveyard Ledge and Kingstone, which just feels, no.
Each of those choices feels like you're just walking away from a potential answer.
Yeah, and Turtle Rock is something that you have to do at some... That's a dead rock I've never seen before.
Oh no!
Is that... you can get stuck on top of dead rocks, but I've not seen that happen there before.
He was literally blocked on both sides by that dead rock.
How do hitboxes work again?
They are a strange thing, and I swear this game is not held together with duct tape.
Anyway, Illus got the Kalos Maria straight into Mire, clear that off. You have everything, just go kill the boss. And where are you going then, Illus? Because I think that Illus is the kind of player who would just go Turtle Rock and look for the ice.
I would definitely agree with you on that front. Also want to shout out Illus for 2 very successful Mire 2 rooms. The last one also having been excellent, this one even better. That's an extremely difficult room to get good at. And as, of course, since we've pretty much full cleared the entire dungeon, seeing as the compass counter shows a 7 of 8, Illus just jumping right back to the portals. I believe that's the fastest route, either that or going through the spike key room. I guess it depends if you know how to do north-facing short hops, and I think it's confirmed impossible, so I agree with Illus's choice here.
When I don't know what's the fastest, I just tend to assume that the players know more than me, and chances are they do, because they play the game more than me.
Yeah, I'm on board with that. That's probably a good strategy for both of us.
Just assume that the players know what they're doing, and you're fine.
I really do like how Illus approached this basement, though, knowing that he hasn't hit the crystal switch, still getting the spooky activation through the wall there. It's so easy to accidentally use the spooky glitch in the first room on your return visit. Which, of course, is a not fun time.
Yeah, it never is. So Illus is going for dash straps? Or just slashing, I guess?
Yeah, good enough to do it, and of course, compared to shadyforce, we'll have the option to default to arrows, having the bow this time around. So definitely a much safer fight.
These chain jumps are not being kind to Shady. And 8 shots with the bow.
Getting the mirror transition, I love it. If you can switch to that mirror, it just feels real nice.
You could go straight into desert here and clear off land molas.
We still haven't turned in that green pendant from shadyforce, have we?
No, because Shady hasn't returned there due to not having the bow.
That would be a very mean place for the second bow.
Oh, absolutely. Equally mean for the ice rod. Speaking of which, it's in Turtle Rock today again.
Hey, there we go. In the last place that you'd expect to find a cold object.
And guess what? Illus is going Turtle Rock!
Maybe that's the randos, the algorithm's way of saying, hey, maybe you shouldn't have thought you were smarter than me. You know, I mean, you definitely would not expect to find something ice cold in this scenario.
Definitely not, but Illus is gonna go into Turtle Rock, get the ice rod, has all the other crystals finished, and Shady... Even if Shady at this point finds a bow in here, I definitely say Illus is ahead at this point, because Shady will have to reclimb the mountain later.
Yeah, so I mean, even though Eastern Palace and Palace of Darkness are fast finishes in this scenario, just the advantage of not having to climb back up and getting a head start on GT, I mean, it would be very difficult for shadyforce to catch up this gap. Possible, just very difficult.
Yep, that is definitely the case. And these checks that shadyforce is doing right now, Illus can skip them, because they will get the ice rod beforehand.
The other thing that's potentially bad here is that if shadyforce finds the bow on the way to Trinex in a place where Illus would normally check, say looking for a small key, that's actually only going to hurt him more, because Illus will then have silver arrows.
Yeah, because right now we're looking at Master Sword Silverless Ganon, which is a fight that no one wants to do voluntarily.
And we've seen more than a few races in this tournament and past tournaments that have been decided by someone having a lot of trouble with Master Sword Ganon, even people who practice it. It is by far the most difficult boss fight you can do.
It's a long fight, it's a stressful fight, it's a difficult fight.
Although I will say that half magic definitely helps a lot.
Yeah, that is definitely the big thing. And if you get enough triples in phase 4, you will be pretty safe. But I almost say phase 2 is harder than phase 4 with all the bats. Because once you get to phase 4 and you get in the rhythm, it is pretty straightforward, but phase 2 with the bats can be a big nightmare to deal with. Shadyforce, how are you? I think Shadyforce missed something. But we'll get out of the room anyway.
Yeah, I could definitely see where, like, you know, Shady Force, if he finds, say, another sword, or if he, you know, ends up basically having to default back to his Master Sword strats with Ganon, this might be an example of where having speedrun experience really does help out a lot. Getting those triples, as you mentioned, a very difficult execution strategy, that would pay off massively in a Master Sword situation.
You will need 24 spins in phase 4, and at most you can get 3 per cycle, that's 8 cycles. And I don't think I've actually ever seen anyone in a random race actually get 8 cycle phase 4.
No, that would be incredible. Of course, there is the 2 that you can get prior to the first torch lighting, which I think a lot of people do to try to achieve that 8 cycle, but that's still really difficult.
Well, you know, it's still a GT climb, and GT tends to have a sword, you know.
That's true. Plenty of swords out there still. There's still 2 that we have not accounted for in all of the things we've done. Illus getting that ice rod will be at go mode at about an hour and 23 minutes and 40-ish seconds, while Shady Force is walking into Trinex, getting a pretty strong hammer fight so far.
I should have used the Master Sword there for the first head, and is now opting to use the hammer for the second.
Trinex's positioning, kind of unfortunate for the fire rod shot, but very fortunate for the hammer hits, taking advantage of the recoil from the hammer to actually stay in position against that wall.
Now that head is vulnerable at the start of phase 2 for some reason, so you just hit the head.
I believe it is until it reaches the spikes on the left side of the wall.
That is a bizarrely long distance just to get the compass of Turtle Rock.
Yeah, that feels pretty bad.
So where is Shady Force going now to look for this bow? Because you still have stuff like smiths to do. You have a pendant ice palace, but I do think you do the Sora stuff before you go there.
Yeah, I mean, thinking about it, I mean, he knows that in this scenario, it's not like this race has been like a logical scenario where somebody couldn't potentially god route it, and not seeing a dot done at this point might be thinking about his Sphere 1 locations. Shady Force is, by the looks of things, instead going to do the Smith Chain, as you mentioned, as you can get a lot of things done at once. So at this point, Shady Force's best hopes are sword upgrades and, of course, finding a bow, which is the one thing needed still for go mode.
Shady Force could also go east here and check Graveyard Legs, I almost said. Graveyard Ledge and King's Tome.
Well, I mean, he does have the boots, so he's got his Graveyard Legs running right now. We'll end up getting to the ledge, and as you mentioned, King's Tomb is accessible because of Mirror and Titan's Mitts. Either would get him in there.
Well, I do think that Boost who love being in the graveyard, they don't have any legs.
Certainly none to stand on at this point. They are interred instead.
God, this is so bad.
The puns or Shady Force's sequence here?
I'm gonna have a bone to pick with you later.
Yeah, I don't have a better one than that. That was pretty good.
It was awful. It was absolutely awful.
Well, pushing these things aside, Shady Force finding the King's riches in the King's Tomb with an absurd number of rupees. Both of them have plenty to work with, nothing that they need to spend it on, but, you know, it's good to have it.
So I think we are going to the Sora locations now, unless Shadyforce is just going straight into ice. And they are not.
Which is excellent for Shady Force, as we've seen before. This will at least put him into go mode here shortly. Illus did actually check the waterfall cave here, so no surprises to be had, and hopefully he doesn't take time to get a bee in a bottle.
As long as Shadyforce... Okay, I was a bit worried there, but it was just setting up the dash. So I guess Illus just has to find a biggie, huh?
Now, that could be a slow and arduous process, but at this point, I don't see why Shady Force would end up making a weird GT decision that would put him in the lead in this scenario. I think his best case scenario is that Illus either takes some kind of death in GT during the climb, or struggles with a lack of Tempered Sword to finish off Ganon. That would be his best hope. So about a 5-minute gap between the two, maybe 4.5-minute gap for go mode. But Shady Force 2 crystals to get still.
This is definitely Illus's race to lose at this point.
You may see some numbers in chat. We forgot to mention it, but there is a guessing game. Pretty late to guess now, but of the 22 locations, there is a big key in here somewhere. Go ahead and keep throwing your guesses in there if you'd like to play along with us. Marjevich, where do you think we're going to find it today?
I don't know, maybe on the torch? No, that's a small key. That's good enough.
It is a key.
Yay! Do I win something?
You win access to the next key lock door.
Yeah. Wait a second here.
You win the security of knowing you can climb the tower as soon as you find that big key.
You know, this is something that I always found confusing about... Okay, finding a sword is pretty good. About just how the Zelda games are work, because normally chests tend to be locked, you know, and you need a key to open them. But in Legend of Zelda, all the chests are unlocked and the keys are inside of the chest instead.
Yeah, that is pretty bizarre. And I mean, if we always had a sword, I could say, hey, maybe like he pick locks or something like that. But that really is an unanswered question in this series, isn't it?
Yeah.
I also wonder, how good is a bigger key? I mean, does that really make a difference?
I don't know. Does each key look different? Because their sprite is just kind of the same, you know?
Yeah, so I mean, what's stopping Link from just taking one key from one dungeon and literally going through everything? I'm guessing that, like, this key system literally disintegrates the key, like, through some kind of acid degradation. Because, I mean, we lose them every time. It makes no sense.
Maybe it works like the bells in Gisama Lucas Grotto in Final Fantasy IX, where you ring the bell and the door opens and then the bell just shatters.
I gotta say, I'm not too confident in the engineering skills of Hyruleans. I mean, they make these fantastic structures, but then they put the most ridiculous door systems on them. And don't even get me started on how the doors work in this game.
Yeah, I don't know.
Still no big key. 13 items in. Kind of nice to have that compass tracker in this dungeon, actually. Still not finding it, and we didn't really have a good way to get to the right side, seeing as the first small key was on the torch for it.
Yeah, but Illus did find a sword along the way, so Master Sword Silverless is dead. Tempered Silverless is not that difficult compared to Master Sword.
Yeah, it's basically the NMG strat, and both of these runners should be very comfortable with that. I would not expect either of them to really struggle.
Hey, now you got the boomerang for your splash delete.
Yes, perfect timing. And of course, we will not see either of our runners use that in this scenario. It would be very weird for them to add lag to their lives. We will get to see an Armos 2 fight out of Illus, a little bit out of sequence, but it looks like recovered perfectly fine.
Yep, set that up pretty well and gets the kill. Oh, it's right side, so Shadyforce could potentially gain a lot of time here, but it's still a lot of time that needs to be gained.
I would be so shook if Shadyforce immediately went to Tile Room, and that paid off.
Oh dear. There's not many times I've seen that happen.
I mean, the odds are extreme. You know, we're talking a very small percentage of scenarios.
But anything is possible. If you think you're that far behind that that is the choice you have to do, then go for it.
And of course, we are still within the realm of a GT despawn being enough to catch back up. Illus will find that key. It'll be the 18th item here in Ganon's Tower.
Yeah, GTD spawn, quadrant glitch, and Aga 2 death can happen in some universe.
I wish I could say it never happened in the NMG tournament, but rip Parisian player, I feel bad for him. Well, Ganon's Tower, a definite execution gauntlet, so to speak. Illus putting on display some really nice mimic tech using regular arrows. We'll get to see the difference between these two runners as far as their execution goes, as this is one of the most difficult segments of the game, the most combat heavy by far.
And they've probably done this hundreds of times before.
I'm kind of curious to see when these two runners will switch their items in the gauntlet. A lot of people will either hold on to bow or fire rod. Illus, interestingly enough, switched to fire rod already. I don't see that very often, but it's typically a weapon that people will switch to, unless they have silvers and want to do Lamolus 2 with them.
You also have half magic, so you can be very liberal with your fire rod. You don't have to worry about not having enough for Moldorm 2, Lamolus 2.
You can tell that they're feeling the pressure, as there are definitely arrow drops that would be worth picking up. Even one of them would put Illus in a position to use silvers for the final phase of Ganon, should you find them at the top of the tower. So an interesting choice.
Illus is almost certainly here working under the assumption that there is no silvers, but the chests are not that far off, and even 3 silvers is pretty good to have.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, it'd be very fast to finish the phase 4 if you only had to do a couple spins.
Didn't get a 2 cycle there. Unfortunately, did not get that last fire rod shot in.
Stopping to grab just a little bit of magic on the way up. Illus will use the Canis Maria here for 2 very fast Wizrobe rooms, making his way to the very top of the tower as Shadyforce is about to enter Ganon's Tower. As I mentioned before, the gap is not crazy significant, but it will take Shadyforce some time to find that big key. And at this point, I think it's very safe to say it's Illus's race to lose.
That was a bit spookier than it should be for Illus. Now, because of the key layout, though, you're not really incentivized to go right.
Yeah, it would have to be like Shadyforce looking into the scenario, thinking, oh gosh, I'm so far behind, I gotta do something crazy. And even by crazy benchmarks, that's crazy.
And it just seems highly unlikely.
Well, good news for Illus, not getting despawn at the top of the tower. Still has Aghanim to contend with, but with Red Mail should be in pretty good shape.
Alright, not even checking locations.
I think if it weren't for the Temperate Sword, we would definitely be checking those.
Yep. Now, it doesn't have the powder either that Shadyforce picked up in I can't remember.
Yeah, come to think of it, I think it was in a dungeon.
Pyramid Ferry. Pyramid Ferry.
Oh yeah, that's right.
I think it was Pyramid Ferry that had it. Also, Moldorm 2 is just kind of dead.
Yeah, that was very quick. Well, so it's interesting to see though, because I don't believe that Illus has any potions besides maybe that green one from way earlier.
I think there was a fairy in the last potion that was picked up.
I'm pretty sure you're right about that. So I mean, Ganon hugs even with red mail do a fair amount of damage. With green mail it'd be 8 hearts, so 2 hearts for red mail. And if you're attempting to do a very fast Ganon kill, thinking, "Hey, this is the winner's bracket on my line," you might end up making a mistake on that. I'm hoping that it doesn't happen to Illus, but this is a potentially dangerous situation.
I mean, anything could happen here. And you also know that you had to double dip Mire, which you technically didn't have to do, and also double dip Pod for that matter. And if you end up double dipping a dungeon, and you know, oh, you could have done it in one go, chances are you think you're behind, because you tend to assume that your opponent played perfectly.
Well, credit to Illus, it was a very good GT climb, despite some weirdness in some rooms. We saw in that one disappearing bridge room where that guard managed to clip him. That's just a bad roll. That just happens sometimes. Illus really showing the veteran status, not being shooken by that, and making way all the way into Ganon fight. We'll not get a 1+1 because of a weird Trident spin.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. You did see Shadyforce just going right into full left, which unfortunately is the slower way to go about GT today. Speaking of hugs.
Oh, that wasn't a fairy, that was a bee in a bottle.
I think it was a like blue potion. A fairy was picked up early, and that was discarded, and then a bee. And what was the fourth bottle? Of course, they were in Ice Palace. No one's shocked.
Oh, you know what? He checked the wishing well. That's where he got the bee.
Ah, yeah.
All right, well, just some spins to work through here, and this is definitely comfortable territory with the Tempered Sword. Feels very much like NMG if you're doing that, or just really most randomizers races. Illus, of course, needs 12 total spins, can get a maximum of 3 per cycle, as Marjevich mentioned before. In good shape to do so as well, getting a really nice positioning on that Fire Rod.
Oh, that's a really hard triple to get there when Ganon was over in the far right corner. Not to get that one, though.
Although the timing on these Fire Rod shots is sublime, having more opportunity to get these triples than you normally get.
Should just need possibly one more cycle, maybe 1.5. Or just one more hit in general.
And there it is, barring any unforeseen catastrophe with the gap between the Triforce room, Illus will be able to finish up first in this race. I probably could have found that out if I looked at IRC, but, keep the mystery going.
Well, with this win, Illus is going to the winner's match in the group and will be facing Shiva Hayes.
And he will finish with the time officially SRL of 1:40.25. Get your GGs in chat. We'll see if we can pull in real quick for an interview, and it looks like we are actually joined by Illus. GG.
GG.
So Illus, what did you think of the seed?
This seed was kind of mean. It had a lot of pretty nasty traps in it. Like, you could have missed that bow like Shady did. I saw at the end. And you could have missed that bombers. Those mids were pretty nasty. Like, it was pretty evil overall. Or if you're not the type to dip into Turtle Rock for the Ice Rod, the Ice Rod was really evil as well. So yeah, I'm kind of glad I managed to avoid most of those traps. I practiced a bit yesterday, and Zora Ledge always had something, so I decided to check it at some point, and I got rewarded.
It certainly seems like a lot of this foresight stuff really did end up panning out well for you today. one thing that we talked about early in the broadcast was your knowledge of which ones were crystals and which ones were pendant. By finding the correct maps and checking with Sahasrahla, you were able to find out well before Shadyforce was which dungeons were necessary and which weren't, which ended up being a very nice knowledge advantage.
Yeah, like, I've played a lot of cross keys, or I don't know if it's a lot, but I've played quite a bit of cross keys before, and you always talk to Zaha. I was considering talking to the bomb shop as well, but I didn't feel like it was too necessary. Like, I knew all the crystals already after doing Keystone, so I skipped out on that. And yeah, it's a bit of a weird mix of normal mode and Key Sanity, where the aspect of not knowing what dungeon you have to complete is in play, and it's kind of fun. I've been liking the shuffle.
Well, the maps and compasses may have been shuffled in this race, but the bracket is now shuffled into position. You have Shiva Hayes coming up next. You have a potentially three game series to consider. Are you going to be too worried about maps and compasses in the future, or are you going to probably expect your opponent to pick something different?
I'm not too worried. Like, I think I'm relatively strong at that mode. Kind of suits me, and in general, none of the modes would worry me too much. Like, maybe some 6-6 shenanigans, but I think I'm pretty good at those as well. So yeah, come at me, Shiva Hayes.
Having just finished the gauntlet has been thrown. So this finishes up your first series of the groups phase. We still, of course, as you mentioned, Shiva Hayes up next, and then we'll have Shadyforce versus his opponent as well. That is Neaterific. So you won your first series, in a best of three. Shiva Hayes won their series 2-0. Do you have any concerns about that going into the finals of this group?
Not really. I think Shady is a strong opponent, and he's a really good contender for a spot for the brackets. So I'm not too worried just because Shiva Hayes beat Neaterific 2-0. I think I'm still favored. I've been in the first quartile, and yeah, I've had a lot of experience up until now, and I feel like I'm one of the best runners in this, so I should go into this with a lot of confidence and try to play like I always do and hopefully win.
Well, hey, I'm glad to hear that, and we will all be watching your rest of your tournament run with bated breath to see how that all turns out. As you mentioned, first quartile is exceptional. We are looking at the end of Shadyforce's run here as well. So before we switch over to talk about his Ganon fight, any last remarks you'd like to share with your fans out there?
I've seen a lot of people supporting me, and it's really cool. And I'd like to thank everybody who cheered for me, and I hope I can meet your expectations, guys.
Well, we're expecting great things. So you're welcome to stick around with us and watch the finish with Shadyforce, maybe chat with him in the interview. We're going to talk about Shadyforce's Ganon fight here. Shadyforce, of course, finishing up the seed like a champ. Considering the things that he had behind as you were walking into GT, pretty impressed that he's walking in just 6 minutes behind for the Ganon fight itself, as that was quite a lot of execution to catch up with. We're going to see a pretty valiant attempt at a 1+1 here, and it looks successful as best as I can tell.
Yeah, Shadyforce just completely nailed the execution in this fight.
As to be expected, the guy does have a 129 NMG time, which is pretty amazing.
That is certainly very impressive.
And I guess it speaks to, as Illus was mentioning, a strong contender. Execution, definitely an important factor in this tournament. We'll see if Shady Force's match against, slipping names right now, against Nidorific, if that'll end up being the winning or losing factor.
Yeah, I would say that Shady Force is the favorite going into that best of 3. Even though Shady Force is in the 4th quartile, I think he easily could have placed better in the qualifier.
Well, we get to see examples of an excellent Ganon fight here. This is an important skill to have. I mean, pretty much everything about your run, culminates in this. Nice to see that we have a tempered fight today. We were very much expecting a Master Sword fight going into GT, and it looks like Shady Force will finish that off with gusto.
Yeah, another very well executed tempered serverless fight here today.
And with that, Shady Force will finish in second place today with a time officially an SRL of 1:47.51. GG's in chat, folks. And hopefully, it looks like we have Shady Force in the waiting room. We'll see if we can pull him in. And we are joined by Shady Force. GG, Shady Force.
Hello. Thanks, dude.
GG
GG, Illus.
Shady.
Yo, thanks. Good races. Good set of 3 races, I think.
Yeah.
So is this seed the rudest or what?
I mean, it's not the rudest. We've had some extraordinarily rude seeds over the past few years, but it was pretty bad. I fell for quite a few of the traps, and I'm a bit annoyed at myself. I don't know whether I'm unlucky or whether I just made some bad decisions. Probably a bit of both.
Is there any decision that you're particularly unsatisfied with?
Well, I put off escape too long. Now that didn't really was a factor, but I just forgot that escape was a thing. And I went into pod without the bow, and maybe I could have gotten to the Zora area before then, or maybe I should have done escape before then. And when I went to Death Mountain, I think I had 3 or 4 visits to Death Mountain. Maybe I could have delayed them a little bit. So I just feel like a lot of my decisions weren't the best. But I did check the Lake Island. I made sure that there was nothing there. That was the most important thing.
Definitely. I did the same, like kind of early, with an early AP dip actually. I kind of regret a few of my routing decisions as well. Like sometimes I go for the catfish early after the high cave, and I didn't do so this time. And of course I got punished. I did go into pod without the bow as well, and I've had a ton of double dips. So it could have been quite a bit faster than this, but you don't know beforehand, right?
Yeah, like on the last race, I knew I was behind, and I knew Illus was going to be miles ahead of me. But I wasn't sure what was going on in this case because I could see that there were traps, and I mean, Illus is he's not gonna find the God Root all the time. So he could have been unlucky with the bombus, or he could have been unlucky with catfish or whatever. So I didn't know I was far behind. I knew there was a chance he was way ahead. So I didn't really know. So I just minimized chat, and I was just doing my thing in GT. I didn't know he was finished until I had finished.
Yeah, I was absolutely not sure either whether you were ahead or behind. Like, I was kind of glad that I avoided Ice Palace and that I got my stuff kind of in time. But you could have done the same, and yeah, you could have done some things better, like the catfish thing. So I was not too sure either. I couldn't really see it.
Yeah, this will be an interesting one to watch back, and maybe I'll have a better idea then of which decisions I made were just objectively worse and where maybe I just got unlucky. So it'll be interesting to evaluate.
Well, from the commentary side, I'll say there were a lot of back and forth moments for the entire race. It was not really clear where we stood until it became apparent that the bow and ice rod were basically last items for us.
Yeah, Illus, did you manage to get so you got the bow, and then Turtle Rock was your last crystal, I think?
Yes, I delayed the dip for a bit, like the Dark Mountain trip, like that. it's a bit harder to say. And it took some time to get the mirror, so I went into Eastern Palace and then I went into Port, and I was pretty sure that maybe Swamp Palace or something, so I did left side, things like that. But yeah, I had the bow way before, because I really wanted to check that Zora ledge.
Yeah, no, fair enough.
I actually did remember something. Illus, I'm confused by your Skullwoods route. What happened there?
Oh right, I actually heard from some commentator that you'd always find a key when you drop down there. So I tried it out and it failed miserably.
I think you were told some lies there. It is definitely not guaranteed.
That is actually a recent change. Version 31 no longer guarantees a key in that spike room.
Yeah, but it's not just that spike room. I mean, I thought that maybe the logic had been changed, so you'd find one key in one of those 3 chests. But apparently you didn't. It was the flute anyway, so it wasn't that bad because I could just go back and activate the flute. But it was unfortunate.
Well, looking forward, Shadyforce, you have Neaterific for your next series to try to stay here in the group's phase. Do you have any plans for this? Are you considering throwing maps and compasses back into the mix if things go awry?
Well, it was interesting. I think it's an interesting mode. I just want some variation. I don't want to do like a million open seeds. I just want to do some different things. So maybe next time it'll be 6-6, or maybe it'll be fast Ganon. Who knows? I just want to mix it up a bit. I don't think there's a huge advantage or disadvantage against most players for these modes, and everyone's fairly close anyway. So it's just about picking some fun races to do, to be honest.
Hovering in 6-6.
Oh yeah, that's true. Maybe I won't be picking 6-6 against Andy and Keytrain and those kind of dudes. Ack.
Yep.
Shadyforce, you didn't talk to Sahasrara and didn't get that green pen and the information of Desert, since you checked the map several times later.
Yeah, a little bit of an oversight not to talk to Sahasrara. It's usually a good idea in this mode. I don't think it had an effect in this game because, as it happens, Thieves' Town was a pendant, but I don't really see how you avoid clearing out Thieves' Town anyway. And by the time I did pick up some maps, it was fairly efficient to check because it's just 1 or 2 maps, and then I'm not going to find out the information about the other 2 pendants without a map check anyway. So you have to do a couple of maps later on. I don't think it actually had an effect, but yeah, in hindsight, it's a good idea to always check those. We certainly made sure we did when we did the proper full key sanity tournament. We always talked to Saha and the bomb shop dude.
Yeah, both of you did Thieves' Town around the same time. You got the pendant, and you already had the Ice Palace map at that point, which I think Illus had already checked and saw that was the pendant, and Illus had talked to Sahasrara, so we knew that where all the 3 pendants were, but you lacked a little bit of information. Did you actually opt to full clear Desert due to not having that information?
Maybe, but well, at that stage, Desert was one of the few places open to me. I think I was still searching for the hammer at that point. So I was kind of running out of locations. I just found the mirror. Or maybe I'm getting mixed up. I just found the mirror, and I was like, "Where can I go?" I didn't have the flippers, so I couldn't go to Ice or Swamp, and I had ruled out the Zora area checks there as well. So I thought Desert was a good place to go to anyway, despite it being a pendant or not. As it happened, it was just a waste of a check, but
Yeah, and it had a cane.
like, had I seen it was the green pendant, I probably would have done the same thing. Gotten all the items and beaten the boss for the green pendant, so...
Well, I
Well-
might have done the same thing if the cane hadn't been in the front.
Yeah,
that ended up being fortunate in different ways.
yeah, at the time, I
That's-
don't think the cane opened up that much for me. I can't remember if I had the tools to go into Mire at that point. Maybe I did.
It's definitely gonna be interesting to rewatch.
Yeah, I feel less bad about this than I did the previous siege, where I think I just made so much more worse decisions, completely deserved to lose. I thought I played okay this time, but it's just the way it goes.
Well, personally, I'm a big fan of this group stage giving us multiple best-of-3 series, as losing this series does not mean you're out, which is great for the viewers, because I think more people want to see both of you guys run, and have a rematch in the brackets. I think that'd be excellent. Speaking of which, folks, if you haven't yet, you definitely should show these runners some love. Throw them a follow on their Twitch channels. They're definitely not just playing in the tournament, they do other things too. And show them some appreciation for putting on a great race for us. This was a fantastic show to watch.
Absolutely. I do think it's about time that we finish things off here. So, do we have any closing thoughts from our players? Starting with you, ShadyForce.
Just good luck in the next race, Illus, and please make sure you win, because I don't want you to lose, and then if I were to be horrific, I don't want to have to face you again. So please make sure you win. Even though Shiva is a good player as well, and this guy I get on with, I want to be facing him and not you, just for variety. So,
shots fired.
A sincerest best of luck to you.
Thank you. I think you can make it. I'll try my best to be first in this group. And yeah, good luck to you as well. I think you can. You're definitely a favorite. So good luck.
Thanks, dude.
Well, we have our Group B matchups finalizing and settling as we are progressing further in this group's phase. If you're looking to watch more A Link to the Past Randomizer today, there is quite a lot of it, as we will expect to see through the rest of the group's phase and, of course, brackets. Coming up on this channel in about an hour, we're going to have Salty Fry versus Mentos Man 8. We will have Josh 124 versus Incoherent on Speed Gaming 4 at 3:20 p.m. These, of course, Eastern Time references. At 4:20 p.m. on Speed Gaming 5, P-Train versus Divvy Signs. And we'll have several other matches later on in the day, including Weighty Words and Big Dunka, Asclepios Rod and Fatboy 300. Another matchup with P-Train and Divvy Signs and there's probably about 10 to 15 other races that aren't even getting restreams that you can also find. So the best way to keep up with this tournament is, of course, to join the tournament Discord and keep an eye on that Speed Gaming schedule that you'll see below the video player if you want to see what else is getting restream coverage for today.
Yeah, there is just so many matches. Not enough for the two of us in the commentary booth or OSS Geek or help with the tracking to do. There's just too much for us. So it's good that we have other people as well helping out, you know?
Yeah, I'm really glad that we don't have to both just do all of these. Although it is a pleasure to share the mic with you, Marjevich. I appreciate you, basically keeping me on the reel for this race. Because, despite some stumbles and some weird gaffes, I think we had a couple good puns in there. I try not to go overboard with this time.
Good. I think it's about time that we sign off for today. So be sure to check out all of the matches that we have later. Follow all of our Speed Gaming channels at 1 through 6, ALTTP Randomizer channels 1 through 5. I also heard there's a YouTube channel or something. Do people watch the votes on YouTube? Do you know that?
Amazingly, yes, quite a lot. There are thousands of VODs, actually. So if you want to catch Speed Gaming content that you can't find the VOD for here, that's definitely a good place to check as well.
I think with all said and done, I've been Marjevich.
And I'm Eudaimonistic. Thank you, folks, for tuning in. We'll see you next time.